Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Glad on this episode, delighted to be talking with comics creator Drew Zucker. Drew, thank you for jumping in, joining, talking with me.
Thanks for having me on.
My
I,
pleasure. My
it's
pleasure.
rare I get to do these by myself.
Oh, yes, yeah. Are you usually with Mr.
Yeah,
Boer? Yes.
yeah, it's usually a cohort type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I've done a few of the pair up episodes with people, but usually I'll have folks on separately. So,
Mhm.
uh, Dave Boer, for folks out there that are listening, has been on a few times. We actually just did a talk about his Ghostbusters book.
If you ever get the two of us together, we will talk forever because
Nice, nice.
it's bad. We feed off of each other, and it never stops.
We will plan on that sometime. That would be great, actually. I love Canto. I love the style of it. I love the storytelling, and I can't remember where I first discovered it. I think it was online somewhere at one of those sites like NetGalley or something,
Mhm.
and just immediately loved kind of the visual design, the color scheme, all of the things. It's a really cool book, and
Thank
very
you.
enjoyable. Yeah, yeah. Now you've also worked on a book called The House. You've
Yep.
done a variety of cover work as well.
Yes. The cover work has been a more recent development. A
Hmm.
lot of it because of Whatnot.
Yeah.
But the house was a whole other odyssey that it went through. It took 7 years, I think, to actually do the completed product. It went to publishers, it made it to editor-in-chief's desks, it was rejected from editor-in-chief desks. It then ended up on uh Comixology Submit, which is no longer around. That was the precursor to Comixology Originals.
Hmm.
Um, and it lived digitally, and then it went through a Kickstarter. Me and the writer Philip Sevey, we hand sold that book for years, uh, until we nearly ran the print rundown, and then finally it made its way over to. At that point, we had both done work with Dark Horse, and we were like, well, we don't really feel like having to hold on to 1,000 books again. Maybe Dark Horse wants to do it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they jumped at the opportunity for it. So, it's been fun. All the books I've done have had very long roads to get to where they are.
Every book has a story, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Both inside and how it got there, I should say.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
100%. That has been my experience with it. No, nothing has a straight line.
yeah. Yeah. So talking about straight lines, how did you come to comics? How did comics sort of find you, or you find comics as the space?
Um, so I growing up, comics were always around. My whole family are artists at least on my dad's side. Uh, but I was not the most studious of children. And reading was not my favorite thing, but I was always drawing, so comics were kind of the natural draw for me. And they were always around. They just kind of came and went from my life, in and out.
Yeah.
And then finally, I get to the towards the end of high school, and my parents are absolutely adamant that I'm going to college, and I've just had enough of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, which then gets me down to Savannah College of Art and Design, uh, which I originally wanted to go for toy design. And I ended up in their sequential department and just kind of rediscovered my love of comics and the fact that I, well, I don't know if I was good back then, but I sure believed I wasn't too bad. Uh, I kind of rediscovered my love of drawing and visual storytelling, and I've just kind of stuck with it ever since. But
Cool.
it really when I went to college, I really kind of rediscovered comics, and I fell into like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, DMZ,
Hmm.
Why the
Hmm.
Last Man, and Lock and Key eventually came into that mix. And I remember sitting on the train going to work, and I read a very particular 5-page sequence in the last issue of Why the Last Man. And it was such a gut punch. I was like, this is what I want to tell stories like this.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And Lock and Key had a very similar uh effect, to say the least.
Yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, and lots of great influences there. Lots of great titles. Why the Last Man is just so
It
it's just so unique.
it's a book that I feel like is criminally it's not talked about the way it
Hmm.
should be these days. And it's a fascinating book because its biggest problem is kind of what the TV show ran into and what the current state of, you know, gender identity actually is, because it plays on a very two, two track way of looking at things.
Hmm.
But the story itself is just it truly is one of the best things to ever come out of Vertigo.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree. As far as your work and sort of the process that you go through, what's that process like? Are you a digital person? Do you prefer media, or any other habits that you might mention?
I'll take you back even further. Most of the projects I've done in the creator-owned space have actually started with me before writers have even come in. Um, so in the case of both Canto and the house, those initial ideas started with me,
Hmm.
where I would write these little paragraph outlines, and I would have a very rough idea of what the story would look like. In Canto's case, there was a drawing that of what Canto originally looked like that went with it, and you know, in both cases, Philip and David came in and sorted out the mess I had made and made it comprehensible
Hmm.
and made a real story out of it. So that's kind of where the creative process starts for me. And then from there, with the drawing, it's the majority of it starts in sketchbook. Traditionally, it's all just kind of scribbling and seeing what comes out. And then from there, it's a lot of scanning. And then I'll do almost all of my pages are penciled digitally. I've just gone away from penciling traditionally, but for inking purposes, that's about 50-50. It's really dependent on what the page is, story context, and deadlines.
Yeah, yeah, cool, very cool. And I imagine part of your process is negotiating all of those deadlines as well,
Mm.
and the things
It,
that are due.
it is. There's always the I, I try and describe what it's like being a comic artist to people, and I tell them you're technically an artist, but you're not the artiste. We
Mm-hmm.
we live much more in the realm of practicality than anything else,
Yeah.
where you want to have those kind of very your inclination is to have those very artiste moments because we're all kind of those types of people, but you're also sort of not that because you're also a technician
Hmm.
and you're producing something that you have to produce so much of on such a tight deadline that you have to find ways to sometimes cheat and navigate your way to the finish line to get it there on time because you're only one part of the machine. But if you muck it up, then you've gunked it up for everybody else down the line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that goes to being a good collaborator,
Yes.
and the business person side of it as well as the artist side of it. So, yeah.
More than most artist positions, you have to wear about 80 different hats.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
That is definitely the trick of it. And it's always interesting when you interact with the writers, and the writers have they're kind of the same thing, but it's always a little bit different. And
Hmm.
then you get to deal with the writer artist who have who just look at like the individual side of it, and they're like, yeah, I don't know what you guys are complaining about. I do all of it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, as far as readers and sort of checking out your work, what do you hope that readers notice and take away?
So I really kind of commit myself to this very high standard that nothing nothing should feel like as a reader you got gypped out of anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I take that to heart very much from a not just a draftsman point of view, but from a production of story, production of the book. Like I want people to not just engage with the story, not just engage with the art. I want them to engage with the overall product that they have. Because I've read books that have phenomenal writing and terrible art, and then I've read books that have fantastic art and terrible writing. And I will tell you, it doesn't work if
Uh-huh.
one is not pulling its weight. They have to work in tandem with each other for this to really come together. And that's what I want for readers to take away from it. I don't necessarily want readers, I obviously want people to be fans of the art I'm doing. I want them to, follow my stuff, to buy in all the way. And I certainly work hard enough to make sure that they feel like that buy-in
Hmm.
was worth it for them. But what I really want for people is to come to the projects I work on and feel like they got a complete story, and that makes them want to go find other stuff or find more of my stuff, or it, inspires them to go and do their own projects the same way other people's work inspired me to go and do this. Um,
Cool.
that's really what I want people to take away from it. And the world is a little rough at the moment, to
Uh-huh.
say the least. And I've had conversations with friends that, you look at a lot of new stuff, and maybe it's just getting older and being a little curmudgeon-y, but you look at a lot of new stuff that comes out and you find yourself, unimpressed compared to what you had or what you are a fan of from years ago. And
Hmm.
sometimes that's rose-tinted glasses, but you know, when you get to do something like Canto, you want to be able to be like, I want people to never feel like they were, that this wasn't fully committed to by the creative team, that they were, that we swung for the fences and we just went for it. Even if we fail at it, that, we were at least trying to do something that would bring people on board.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the book certainly resonates, and as I said, the first time I saw it and dug into it, and as I've continued to enjoy it, it works on a lot of different levels.
It,
Um,
it works on levels that I don't think David or I was really expecting.
mhm,
There is some stuff in there that just happened instinctually. And as we've gotten further into it, and right now it's even more wild because we're doing the last arc for the Shrouded Man saga,
mhm,
and we're now going back to you know, issue 2 of volume 1, where I have to pull reference out of there. And it's like, oh, we were doing all sorts of stuff I did not do on purpose,
yeah,
but just kind of instinctually happened. And then you're getting to integrate it into the larger story again. And, you know, the other end of it is that Canto in particular has definitely reached further and wider than I think uh, either one of us could have ever imagined. It is definitely, we've gotten some pretty touching messages
mm,
from people about how it's affected them. And, you know, at the core of that book, the idea was to give shops something that would be an easy sell for them
mhm,
so that they could always keep it on the shelf and know it was always selling. But also to bring new readership in. Um, that was a active decision that was made in the creation, was how do you kind of reclaim the all ages label. And for so far we've done okay. We have room to grow,
yeah.
but we've done, I think we've done pretty good with it.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I live another life as an educator, and so I love the all ages aspect of it. But then as a comics reader, it works really well for adults as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
My favorite story we got was because the original volume 1 trade from the former publisher and their infinite wisdom of how they assembled the book and the fact that it would fall apart. We got messages from teachers who would have it in their classroom,
Hmm.
and the kids loved it so much that the teachers would hardbind it themselves so
Yeah.
that they could have it in there because it fell apart on like the first read.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
that's like the best compliment we can get is that you went and fixed the problem and it's now in the classroom and you know it's the book that they all go for.
Yeah.
That's that's as good as it gets.
You know the book is loved then.
Mhm.
Well loved.
Which is all anybody in this industry really strives for.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about using yourself as reference, and I imagine that's the moment where you go, yeah, I'm kind of world building now. When you have to go back and look at things that you've created just to kind of match it and explore.
Yeah, it's a really weird uh it's a weird experience. Because then I have to be stopped from being like, so listen, we can redraw the entire first arc, right? Like that's fine. We can just redraw this. It won't take me long. It'll take a year and a half, but it won't take long, I promise. Um, it is definitely a privileged position to be in to have gotten to tell a story for this long,
Hmm.
with the same creative team, no less, that we're getting to go back and do that. And even from the beginning of Canto, David and I had a very clear idea of where this was going. And the fact that, 6 years later, we're at that point is, surreal for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and great longevity to it. Great sort of structure that's been created there visually and verbally to allow for that kind of long-standing storytelling.
Yeah. No, it there's a lot of stuff that just David and I have real clicked as creators. And he knows how to write for me. I know how to draw for him. And it's led to a real collaboration of things where there's a lot of, David gives me a really solid skeleton to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And, then there's all this stuff that I'm just able to, well, this wasn't designed anywhere. I'm just going to draw all these creatures in the background and they have no rhyme or reason or context for anything.
Yeah.
And we kind of learned that that was the best way to do storytelling because now you can go back into that first, second volume and just go through the entire background and be like, well, who do we want to pick out of here and make stories out of?
Hmm.
Uh, that's kind of that's the fun of it now is we're being given those opportunities to you dig into our own work and be like, oh, well, it's been 5 years and we're this much better with this much more experience to it. How can we now develop things beyond what we even originally conceived of?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun to have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I'm sure. Well, by means of a final question, I usually ask about what has your creative attention, and it sounds like more Canto on the way. Um,
Yes.
anything else that you'd mention there that's ahead or that you'd like to be working on?
So what's ahead? Canto will control my life for the foreseeable future, as he always does.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Which is good. I got a small break from it, and I found that I missed it much more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but so the foreseeable future is we're wrapping up the last volume of Canto. There are announcements coming about Canto. My guess is probably in the fall.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, there are 4 months of double shipping. So hardcover, single issue, and then you'll have 2 months of single issues. David and I are wrapping up the fulfillment for our Zoop campaign for a book called The Feeding, which was
Hmm. Hmm.
a horror short story that we did together. Um, I did work for Marvel and Whatnot. That was a collaboration between the two of them. So it was my first interior Marvel work. That's going to be launching in about 2 weeks, I think.
Nice.
And
Nice.
then I have covers galore floating around, plus another project that's a little too early to talk about, but it's, you know, my time is split all over the place, and still I am looking for more to do.
That is a dedicated craftsman.
Uh, I'm
That's what
I'm
that sounds
always
like.
I'm always on the hunt for more to do.
Well, if folks out there want to connect with you, follow the work, and see what it's all about, any social media spaces, online spaces, or convention spaces?
The most active for me is Instagram. I'm on there as Art of Drew Zucker. And then you can find my website is www.artofdrewzucker.com. And then for Twitter is Drew_Zucker. And then for conventions, I will be at Heroes Con this year, which I
It's a
am,
good one. Hmm.
yes, I have not been to Heroes Con in like 10 years. I'm very excited. So I'll be at Heroes Con, I'll be at San Diego, I'll be at New York, and then you can find me on Whatnot at Art of Drew Zucker. We're gearing up for a lot of big shows. I'm attempting to find a way to turn the app into a distribution network
Hmm.
for people that don't have local comic shops. So if you want to get Canto, uh, but you don't have access to a shop, I'm gonna have copies and we'll do probably two or three shows, like first day one, day two, day three, and I'll just offer them at cover price so that people have an opportunity to get it, because I know a lot of people are living in comic deserts at the moment,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it sucks. And what's the point of all this technology if I can't figure out ways to use it for distribution?
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Very well said. Well, Drew, anything that we've missed before we close out?
Nope. Pre-order Canto.
All
It,
right,
it's
all right.
it, it's going to be good. We're headed. We're barreling towards the end, and it's going to be. It is my favorite work that either me or David has done, and I am the harshest critic for both of us.
Yeah. Well, well worth the time. Absolutely. Really enjoy the book. Really enjoy the work, and glad to have you back anytime. Maybe for a double team episode
Yes.
or something like that. That would be great.
No, for sure. Both of us will talk forever if you let us. We are dangerous panel mates to have.
Well, that is a good thing. That is a very good
Yes.
thing. Uh,
So,
well, well,
but
thank you again.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Glad to have you back.